Welcome to Lived In, a podcast series by Hemby Home Co. Lived In is all about interior styling for the ordinary home. If you live in an ordinary house on an average street and you love design, this podcast is for you. Many of us long to infuse the places in which we dwell with both style and livability, but we also have to stick to realistic budgets. What does it look like to live in a space that transitions with you as life does? How do you build equity while creating a space that truly feels like home? And what can you do to make a space yours when it doesn't belong to you? Join me, Hemby Co, a realtor, content manager, and interior advisor, and let's find out. Hi guys, I hope that you are all doing well. I did not, thankfully, receive any hate mail after last week's episode, or I guess 2 weeks ago, the episode 2 weeks ago. And so for that, I'm very thankful. I did actually think about something else that I did not mention in the last episode, and that is split height kitchen countertops. You're probably familiar with what I mean. They are the ones where one side is raised. They're typically on a peninsula or on an island, and one side is raised and the other side is significantly lower. I want it to be all one height. I understand the kind of division of this is a different area where you sit with your bar stools maybe, but I just don't like it visually, and I don't like it in practice either. So there's my 2 cents there. So if you weren't offended last week, hopefully you can be offended now. This week's episode, however, is talking about something very different. We are going to be talking about designing for kids and, being kid-proof or being kid-friendly. There is actually a third option, which I'll get into a bit more, but kid-proof, kid-friendly, and then kid-centric. Now, there are some people who are very kid-forward. Just going to use all the variations that I can. But there are some people who are very kid-forward in their design, maybe even kid-focused in their design. And I say that in that they create spaces for children. Actually, kid-centric. That's what I said earlier. Kid-centric in that they create space for children, but in a way that is really centered around children. And to me, kid-centric maybe is pushing it a little bit. And maybe kid-aware is a better term, actually. Anyway, I think Hannah Otto, during my interview with her last year, she mentioned the fact that the living room is the kids' space too. And so they should be able to make a mess in it and have their toys in there because it's their space too. And I'm going to be honest, that is just not my mantra. Granted, Hannah and I live slightly differently, but that's just not the way that I do it. I have a very zoned approach when it comes to designing for kids. I tend to think, well, this specific area is really designed for the kids, and then this other specific area is really designed for me or for the adults. That's how I typically think about it. And I think partially that is because I don't want to get lost in my kids, and not just in terms of design, but also in lifestyle. The age that my kids are at right now is the age that they are at right now. And it's not the age that they're going to be forever. And so I'm aware of that. And even though I know that they're not going to be young forever, I still don't want to be dominated at this current moment in terms of how I design and how I set my home up. I don't want my kids to dictate that. I want my kids to influence that, but not dictate those design choices. And so I tend to think in terms of zones and then how each zone in the home is going to be used. I'm not saying I have it perfect or that there's only one way. That's just the way that I do it. Now, there are some zones that are really exclusively for the kids. And in those areas, I've made a conscious design choice, or I've made conscious design choices that mean that it's easy for them to clean up and things are accessible to them. And yes, they look nice, but really they look nice in a way that is pleasant for the kids and not just pleasant for me. And then there are other spaces where I know that the space is for the kids and I, or for all of the kids, myself and my husband. And in that instance, then I'm going to design, with things that are pleasing to me, but nothing that is too precious. And then finally, there are spaces I think to myself, all of this really is just my space. And so because this is just my space, I'm going to do exactly what I want to do with it. Granted, even though those designs, the design in that space is not necessarily kid-friendly, I do try to keep those zones kid-proof because kids are still going to be in them, even if they're not for them. Now, when I say kid-friendly versus kid-proof, here's what I mean. And, I think I said at the beginning, there are 3 categories. So kid-centric, kid-proof, and kid-friendly is probably how I'd put those. Now, kid-centric design is designed not just with kids in mind, but for kids, exclusively, explicitly, just for kids. What are they going to enjoy? What are they going to engage with? What are they going to do in that space? What are they going to love? What is not going to be dangerous or potentially hurt them? Basically, this is, creating a kid's playground to me is kid-centric. That's kid-centric design. And I would probably not advise any client to design their space in a way that is kid-centric. Now, unless maybe there is money to burn. And I say that because, kind of like how I said earlier with my own kids are only of their specific age for a certain amount of time. A baby is not going to be a baby forever. And maybe they'll be a baby and there's a 5-year span in which the room makes sense in the way that you have designed it for them as a baby. And then once they hit 10 and up, it needs to be different because now it just doesn't work. So I would avoid kid-centric design unless maybe it was like a playground in the back of your house, or you have a kids' play area in the back of your house. A playroom could be kid-centric. But even then, that's probably going to change in terms of how it's used and how your children interact with it as they age. So you still have to kind of bear some other things in mind. Now, kid-friendly design would be having your house designed in such a way that it's not going to alienate the kids, and it's not a place that they cannot engage with. So that's how I would say that I generally design when I'm designing for kids. So, for example, I've designed my rec room in my house, and I was going to say the living room, but actually there's no way. It's not designed to be kid-friendly. But the rec room in my house, the recreation room, the bonus room, is where we spend time together as a family and we watch movies. Occasionally we play games up there as well. And when people come over and hang out, that's where the kids play. That is a very kid-friendly and I would say fairly kid-proof room. And I guess you have to almost have the caveat that there's no way a room can ever be completely kid-proof because, if you are in close relationship or proximity to any children, you will have observed that they find a way to misuse pretty much any piece of furniture. So, I've said our rec room is as kid-friendly and as kid-proof as I think you can really get for being a rec room and having certain items like a television. And our television is actually mounted to the wall. But, just because it's mounted to the wall doesn't mean it's kid-proof, because if one of our kids is playing with a ball and it hits the screen is broken. That's it. So, there are things I could do. I could put it in a hutch with doors or something like that. But like I said, kids will find a way. So there's a limit. You don't want to go overboard in trying to kid-proof the space only to have something get broken that you hadn't accounted for. So Kid-friendly is essentially just an area where the kids can relax, and even though it's not designed exclusively for them, they don't have to walk around with their hands or with their arms crossed or hands on their heads so they don't mess anything up. I'd also say, to a certain extent, that a kid-friendly space might be one that has performance fabrics for that reason, but we'll get into that a bit more later. But I will say, I say that because a child is going to spill. They are just far more prone to spilling things and breaking things. And so you just have to account for those things and decide that you're willing to take the risk with certain items or just not have those. And again, we'll get more into that a bit later. But I would say something like a spill-proof performance fabric that can be washed or is stain-resistant is a great idea. A lot of people use patterns that disguise spills and stains and use rugs that can be washed. And that kind of thing is going to go a very long way if you are designing a space to be a kid-friendly space. So let's talk very briefly about kid-proof spaces. Now, a kid-proof space, I think about these as something like a nursery or a daycare where nothing is precious and things that could be dangerous to children are kept extremely far out of reach or in areas where kids just don't go. The ground is soft, the walls are soft, everything is wipeable. That to me is a kid-proof space. And nobody wants to live in a space where everything is soft and wipeable. That's just there's nothing appealing or attractive about living in that kind of space. And so why design a whole room around that concept? Now, that's not to say you can't make tweaks around things to make them more kid-proof, but you're not going to, or maybe I should say, I wouldn't advise designing a whole space that way because it's not going to be that way all the time. So out of kid-proof, kid-friendly, and kid-centric, I wonder where you land. Again, I would really stick with kid-friendly. It's almost like kid-adjacent, not designed explicitly for them and exclusively for them, but not designed in such a way that, yes, it's kid-proof, but then it lacks anything that is visually interesting, appealing, stimulating to you as the homeowner, primary person living in the space. Welcome to my thing of the week. My thing of the week this week is somewhat random if you are not familiar with us on Instagram. It is paint. And that sounds somewhat stupid, but I spent last weekend painting our guest bathroom. So our house is Project Edna, if you follow us on social media, and that is our guest bathroom. And it's a small room. I think I've talked about it a bit before on other episodes, but essentially when we bought our house, every single room was painted the same colour. Agreeable grey, Sherwin-Williams agreeable grey. And it's this wonderful colour. I believe it was actually the colour of the year in 2022. I think that's right. But it is this really neutral grey. It's not white, and it's not grey in the true sense of grey. It's a greyish, really, a grey beige. But it has this wonderful way of shifting and reflecting differently and adjusting differently based on where it is. And I know that all colours do that, but with this grey in particular, it's extremely noticeable. And so that colour remains pretty much everywhere in our house. However, last weekend I undertook to paint stripes in our bathroom. And I did that because I mentioned, I think, 2 or 3 episodes ago that was something I was strongly considering. We changed the fixtures in that bathroom, but it was very boring, very palatable, and if you listen to the last episode, palatable is just not really my style. I like something unexpected. I like something slightly different. And I loved the idea of doing a wallpaper, but I have absolutely no experience doing a wallpaper. And I really wanted to do a project that was entirely my own, because God bless my husband, he has a way of stepping up every time I have an idea of any sort and taking on the brunt of the work. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for this, I really wanted to say, hey, I want to do this and I want to be in charge of it. And he hasn't wallpapered either. So I decided on stripes, and I've actually started writing a blog post about this. So when that goes live, I'll make sure to notify all of you. But I decided to paint stripes, and I measured them out with a laser level, and it took me all day on the Saturday to mark and tape and measure. And then I did several coats the following day on the Sunday. And we ended up using, obviously, the agreeable grey as our base, and then also using faded flax flower. That's also a Sherwin-Williams colour. And the thought process behind using Sherwin-Williams again is, you know, the colours are made by the same people. They'll have the same quality, the same kind of tone. And it's a wonderful blue. I think a few weeks ago I posted on Instagram a blue, because I am obsessed with blue. And initially my thought process had actually been to do the agreeable grey in a white, but my husband suggested a colour and I was all for it. So we ended up settling on the faded flax flower. It's a kind of, I don't know how to explain this better, but a Williamsburg blue is how I would describe it. It's very muted, it's not bright, it's not in your face, it's not pastel, it's kind of a dusty, powdery blue. And so far it's turning out incredible. And the thing that I love about paint, after my long tangent, the thing that I love about paint is that it just has the ability to radically transform a space. And if you are looking at a room and you think to yourself, gosh, I really can't stand it, probably the first place I would tell you to start is paint. I would not tell you to paint stripes, because that is very close to, gosh, I mean, there's nothing worse. There are things worse, but not many. I wouldn't recommend you painting stripes on a wall, but I would recommend you painting, because it just can radically transform a space. And even really small touches. You don't have to paint an entire room. You could paint all of the trim the same colour as the walls, or you could paint it an entirely different colour. You could just paint the ceiling, but using paint is just a great place to start in transforming a room. So I would highly recommend that if you're looking at a room wondering what doesn't work, start with paint. Maybe it's the paint colour and the items that have been painted, and nothing is off limits. Honestly, pretty much anything can be painted. Even fabric can be painted. Haven't done that. I'm not recommending it, but it's possible. All right, let's get back to the episode. So let's talk about designing spaces for kids. I've distinguished between kid-friendly, kid-proof, and kid-centric, because really what we're going to be focusing on when we're talking about designing in this episode is designing kid-friendly spaces, not kid-proof, not kid-centric. And so what we'll do now is we'll go room by room, but essentially to make a space kid-friendly, you're going to think about, I would say, 3 different aspects. 1 is accessibility, 2 is wear and tear, and 3 is preciousness, if you want to put it that way. Things that are precious. Now, let's start with a bathroom. And, again, it's particularly top of mind for me because I've spent the last weekend and the last week working on our downstairs guest bathroom, which is also used by our kids. We do not have the luxury, well, in a way we do. We're very fortunate that we do live in luxury to an extent. And I know luxury is relative. But anyway, we don't have the luxury of having a bathroom that is only used by our children and then having a powder room or a half bath that is only used by our guests. In our house, the downstairs bathroom that is accessible to guests is also the bathroom that is used by our kids. And so it has to have, or rather it has various demands on it. And in reality, that's normal. Most of us have rooms that have to work in a variety of different ways. Now, in our bathroom, making it kid accessible or making it accessible for the kids has looked like having a faucet that is easy for our kids to close properly. The faucet that we had when we moved in that bathroom, before we started doing anything to it, would consistently be left running. And it was one of those that you just lift and push down, but it was stiffer. And so for whatever reason, the kids just could not or were not closing it properly. They weren't closing it fully. And so water was leaking. And so making it accessible for them meant getting a faucet that was really easy for them to use, just up and down, really simple. It also looked like having storage that could be hidden. And we wanted the kids to be able to reach things so that they can put them away. But the vanity that we had in that bathroom previously was one that it didn't have any shelf inside, very similar to the one that was in our master bath. And that was annoying because there wasn't enough of a surface on top for you to rest things, just because of the type of sink that was on the top. And then underneath, there was nowhere to put anything because everything was just kind of on the floor. So toothbrushes were in a cup under the sink, along with everything else. It was consistently messy, and that wasn't very helpful. It has also looked like having a stool. So, we've had to account for that. And that's the reason why we switched from a vanity to a pedestal, because it's a tiny bathroom, because the kids needed a step in order to reach the tap, reach the towels, that kind of thing. So if you've got small kids, can they reach the sink to wash their hands? Practically, you're probably not going to pick them up and hold them every time so that they can wash their hands. Can they flush the toilet easily? Can they sit on the toilet easily? These are all some of the things that I had to factor in when it came to making our bathroom accessible. And there were a few other things that I had to think about that were issues, like the placement of our hand towel ring was really awkward, and so the kids just never used it. We had to actually move it to a location where they'd be able to reach it. Can they hang their towels up on their own after a bath or a shower? As parents, my husband and I were really trying to foster healthy independence in whatever ways make sense for our children, dependent on their age level and that kind of thing. And so we have tried to accommodate and facilitate them being able to do those things down the road. So accessibility matters. The other two aspects that I mentioned are wear and tear and preciousness. Now, for wear and tear, there are a few different things to think about, but essentially, kids are not gentle in their use of anything. Don't know if you know this. I think actually the only things are stuffed animals that my children take care of. And even then, it's limited. Sometimes they're really precious about them and other times they're not. So kids are going to really use things. They're not going to use things in the way that adults do, where they're gentle and they're watching out to make sure something doesn't get damaged. Kids aren't doing that. So starting with even just paint choices, choose a paint that can be wiped. Choose a paint that is solid and when it gets wiped isn't going to reveal whatever is underneath. Now, I have to admit, with our bathroom, that wasn't our main focus when we chose our paint. Our main focus was matching what was already present. So you have to just kind of determine what your priorities are. Similar thing with flooring. With the flooring, you want a flooring that isn't going to be too delicate underfoot because, again, kids are dragging things along, running on it, jumping on it. They are really using the flooring in a way that is different to the way an adult would. So choose flooring in a similar fashion. And in a bathroom, that's going to mean the floor is going to get wet, probably very wet, to make sure the flooring can take it and it's not going to rot subfloor or anything like that. You also need to think about things that go in the wall. So we had a towel bar in our bathroom when we first moved in, and it got ripped out of the wall because the kids were taking the towels off, but they were pulling the towel that had been wrapped around the bar and ripping it out. So we patched the wall once, and then we put in a new towel rail, and the same thing happened, despite us warning them. So this time we had to be the ones to learn, and we got hooks instead. They're going to have hooks. They hang their towel on the hook, and hopefully, but who knows, they'll pull it and it won't pull the hook out of the wall. Another thing that we had to think about in our house was a shower curtain rail. Now, or a shower curtain rail. My husband hates tension rods, or tension rod shower curtains. I don't hate them. I can be far more on board with those than he is. However, what happened with our most recent shower curtain rail that was a tension rod was that it was put up higher above our tub insert. So we have one of those not so pretty fiberglass shower tub inserts. And we put it higher up because we have high ceilings and we don't want to cut the room in half with a shower curtain. Highly recommend doing that. And unfortunately, our kids are always tugging on the shower curtain, and it actually rubbed and removed the paint on the walls, and we had to patch the wall and paint over it. Is this just me, or are all kids like this? Because I don't know. Maybe all kids don't do this. Maybe my kids are just particularly bad, and they are not awful kids. They're great. They just don't know how to take care of things or do things gently, which, again, is that all kids or just mine? But because of that shower curtain rail, we kind of went back and forth. My dream, really, for that bathroom would be to have, well, my dream would be to have a walk-in shower with a glass door. No shower curtain, no tub, you just walk in. And for my in-laws who visit us often, that would be great for them in terms of accessibility, because they are both disabled and need to use a shower chair when they take a shower. So that would be much more user-friendly and accessible for them. However, I don't want to put upwards of 10 grand into that bathroom. I would like to put no more than 2. So we're not doing that. The next level down dream would be to, okay, we keep the tub, we replace the tub, we tile the wall. Well, that is going to be fairly close in cost to the shower, so we're not doing that. The next step down from that is we keep the tub insert and we put a bathtub screen or a bathtub door on it so that water doesn't splash out, but we don't have to deal with curtain rods. That doesn't work for my in-laws who visit us quite often and stay with us quite often. So we are going to have a shower curtain rod. I know, what a roller coaster ride of emotions. From a shower to a shower curtain. But we are going to have a shower curtain. However, we're just going to do one that is fixed and mounted to the wall, so it cannot move. It can move. Nothing is kid-proof, like I said earlier, but hopefully it won't move. And that seems like the best solution for us. Now, in terms of preciousness, and, I've broken this down. What is precious? What isn't? Are you going to make sure that stays in the room, or are you going to take it out? In our bathroom, the most precious thing right now is the paint on the walls, because if it gets wrecked, I will cry. So we're being careful with that. But really, in a bathroom, when you're thinking about preciousness, it is keeping the pricey, delicate things out of reach or out of the space. So in that bathroom, we have a plastic soap dispenser. We don't have one that's glass or metal. Our mirror or our medicine cabinet is mirrored, but it has a frame, so it's less likely to break and the kids can't really slam it, and it has a magnetic closure, so it closes securely. Something I wanted to do for the space was to put in a glass shelf, but I'm not doing that because I'm sure it would get broken and there would be glass everywhere, and it's just not worth the risk for the beauty of it for the kids. So I'm opting out of doing that design element. And I'm not having anything on the walls that just does not sit fairly flush or flat like a piece of art, because I don't want things to get knocked over or broken or that kind of thing. So keep the precious things out. Let's talk about kid-friendly kitchens. Now, accessibility in a kitchen is going to look different than in a bathroom, and it's going to depend a lot, again, like I said, for the bathroom, on the age of your kids. For accessibility, I'm thinking about stools and the height of the countertop. In our house, again, we have small kids and they can't reach things. We want them to be able to get a glass of water by themselves because we're trying to foster that level of independence. And so in that instance, our countertop is not going to be lower because it doesn't make sense for us and for anybody else who then comes into the house after us and lives in it after us. But we are going to have stools in the kitchen so that the kids can easily come in, drag the stool up, and get a cup of water. Similar to that is keeping things at drawer level or not keeping them at drawer level. This depends on the age of your children again. Babies and toddlers have a habit of going into kitchens and opening drawers and throwing things out and opening cupboards and that kind of thing. If you keep things like chemicals of any kind under your sink, you don't want that. So that's when I would recommend using a different latch type, maybe one that you have to lock and close versus just a door that opens by, with a knob. If you want kids to get into drawers and be able to get things, which is what we want for our kids, we put all of their plates and their cups and their silverware or their cutlery at a level that they can reach. If you don't want that, you need to put those things higher up. So you just have to think about things like that. Something I love for kitchens is a faucet. And there are a few I've seen actually that are foot pedal faucets. So if your child can't reach the tap, they can at least stand on the foot pedal and put their cup underneath the faucet and the water will come out. That's really nice. That's a nice touch. But having just an easy to use faucet is helpful as well. One that doesn't require turning and turning and turning. If it's for a child, then you want it to be simple and easy for them to use. Now, in a kitchen, wear and tear kind of overlaps with preciousness. Kids are so sticky and so dirty all the time. And I don't think that I think I thought at a certain age it stopped. And I hope that it will. Teenage years, here we come. But as of right now, all of my kids are sticky and forget to wash their hands or put their hands in their mouth or go outside and dig in the dirt and then come inside and put their fingers on the countertop. They are dirty all the time. So you need something that can easily be wiped. You need something that isn't porous. I love marble. My dream would be to have marble in the kitchen because I just think it's so beautiful. But you have to make peace with the fact that marble is, it's porous. And so if you have a spill, it's going to stain and it's going to show in the marble. Now, in the long run, I don't mind that so much, but that's not everybody's cup of tea. So you need to kind of make sure that you are at peace with the fact that there are going to be stains on your countertop if you have kids. Or if you have other people who stay with you regularly who are not as on top of spills as you are. If I spill something, I wipe it up pretty much right away. If my husband spills something, it might never get wiped up. Love you, babe. And so you need to think about that kind of thing. Kids also drop things and are not precious about anything. And so if they drop something on the surface, will it crack? Porcelain is a beautiful material. It's extremely prone to chipping, though. If you drop something on it, it chips. And it's only got the design on the top. It doesn't run all the way through. So it's not something that can be buffed out like you could with a quartz or a quartzite or a granite. It's just printed on the top. So you have to think about that kind of thing as well. Don't have something that's maybe too precious if you're going to be upset about it when it gets damaged. One more thing, consider splash limiting faucets. We have a faucet that has its own built-in pull down, so you can pull down and rinse around your sink and whatever it is. When my kids use that faucet, they don't pull it down. They open the tap, so it's pushing out all of the water, and then they splash everywhere. You can get taps that limit or faucets that limit the amount of splash. So that's something I would also recommend in a kitchen. Okay, let's talk about other rooms. And the reason I'm doing it like this is, in a kitchen and in a bathroom, there are fixtures and certain things that are necessary to be in those rooms. And accessibility is going to be a lot more of a priority in those rooms because of those fixtures versus in other rooms like a living room or a bedroom or a dining room. In those rooms, it's really more about wear and tear and precious items than it is about accessibility. Granted, in a dining room, you might have a high chair if you have young children. So here, you're really going to focus on furniture and decor. I will start with performance fabrics. You don't actually have to have a performance fabric to have a fabric that is child-friendly. You just have to be aware of some other things. In our house, our main sofa in our downstairs living room is a leather sofa. And I like leather. It is porous, if you want to call it that, in much the same way as marble, in that if it gets spilled on, there's probably going to be a ring. If you get to it pretty much immediately, there might not be a stain, but 9 times out of 10, there might be something. The nice thing about leather is, provided it's generally well taken care of and it's not extremely old, it's still going to continue to live well. And you can buff it and take care of it and make sure it remains beautiful, even with those stains. So I like leather as a parent, because my kids can sit on it, and if they spill, I can wipe it and it's fine and we move on. I also like it because I have pets and I don't like pet odors, and the leather doesn't take on any smells if the animals smell, which sometimes they just do. You can do performance fabrics, so you can do ones that are, I think, odor resistant, and you can do fabrics that are spill resistant as well, or spill proof, so that if something falls on them, you can wipe it off, which is insane to me. It's wonderful. I have never owned performance fabric items, partially because many of the things I've bought are not custom. I've just bought regular things. But you can buy performance fabric furniture from places like West Elm and CB2. You just have to choose that option when you're picking the fabric that you want for the chair, let's say. Something I've also seen, and I think I mentioned this earlier in this episode, is people buying fabrics that are covered in patterns, so that if there are spills, they're not very noticeable. They're kind of disguised by the pattern, and that works too. Think again about floor choices in your kitchen. Sorry, not your kitchen, your bathroom. No, not your bathroom either. Good grief. Think about floor choices in your rooms, like your living room and your bedroom and your dining room. I am gentle when I move my chairs in the dining room. Kids just drag them. So if you have a sensitive flooring, it's going to scratch. Kids spill more than adults most of the time. So if you have a wood flooring, make sure that you're able to get to that quickly and wipe that up. Or choose something that is just not going to be so sensitive to moisture. Another thing to think about would be rugs. What's on your floor? If you have a rug that is not machine washable, maybe swap it out for one that is machine washable, so that if there are spills, you can easily put that in the washing machine and take care of it. Another thing to think about here is also window treatment choices. Our kids loved, and thank God they've listened to us and stopped doing it now. They love playing in our curtains. They like to hide behind them and wrap themselves in it and then pull away. And we've had more than one curtain rod be bent or dipping in one area because of our kids playing around with them. So maybe you don't choose curtains for that reason. Maybe you choose a blind or you choose shutters. But think about that kind of thing as well. Then there's decor. And I am a fairly undecor friendly person. I really like useful things. So I have on my nightstand a really lovely soap dish, and that contains my earrings. And I have in my bathroom a frame with a picture of us. And I have a vase on our dining table and some candles. But beyond that, I don't like having things for the sake of having things. So the advice I'm going to give is probably a bit more stringent than what most of you would like. But really, if there are delicate items around, move those away. Kids hit things, they just do. They touch everything all the time, and I don't understand it. They touch, and then they ask, when you tell them not to touch it, well, what is that? But if there are delicate items around that could fall and smash if they were hit, move those things away. Put them out of reach, put them out of sight. You can use a hutch or a china cabinet or a sideboard, but put things out of the way where they cannot be messed around with, or they are less likely to be hit. Again, you can't really kid-proof a space, but you can attempt to. Seat choices in a dining room, or maybe even in your living room with accent chairs or your sofa. I really like chairs that are wipeable. If I'm going to have a wooden chair, that's fine. I want something I can wipe, that is easy to, I can fix it with a stain or a varnish and it looks good as new. If we're looking at seat covers, I want something that is a leather or a faux leather that I can just wipe. If something sticky gets on it, it's not going to seep into the fabric and stain it. Lastly, well, actually second to last, because I've just thought of something. Lastly, I'm still saying lastly, use furniture placement to obstruct items that you don't want kids to have access to. So if you don't want kids to open that bottom drawer, Strategically place a chair in front of it and a table. Put things in the way to prevent them getting to the things that you don't want them to get to. I remember seeing a lot of this at Christmas with people saying, how do you keep your kids away from a tree? Some people saying, how do you keep your dogs away from a tree? You can use things like dog gates or the kid gates, the children's gates, the baby gates. I don't know why I'm calling them children's gates. Baby gates that you can kind of close, and that keeps people out. But you can also try and do it cleverly by putting things in the way so that kids just don't try and engage with it. Here's my last one that is maybe slightly controversial. Some of you may like it, some of you may not. But consider having places in your home that are out of bounds for your kids. And some of you aren't going to like this because, yes, it is your kids' home too, but you also have to live in it. And I find places that my kids have, in quote, free roam in, where they can go everywhere and hang out, tend to be places where I find myself the most stressed. And so a decision my husband and I made early on was that our kids were not going to be able to come into our bedroom or our bathroom. That was a private space. And that's because we don't want all of the clutter and the toys and all of the other things in here. And I don't want to have to nag them to clean up yet another room where they leave the things out. So having a space that's out of bounds for them means I always have a space that is just mine, where I only have to worry about myself. And I don't think that that's too selfish, but it's a recommendation I might have. Our kids are allowed in our living room, even though it's not a kid-centric space. We've tried to make it kid-friendly, but it's definitely not kid-proof, and there are things around that can be broken. But really, that's not the place we're encouraging them to run around and play. If they want to do that, we say, go to the rec room. Go for it. Knock yourselves out. But not in this space. That's not a space that they're not welcome in, compared to our bedroom and our bathroom, which are a space that they are, or which are spaces rather, that they are not welcome in, ever, unless I'm holding one of them, or we explicitly invite them in for something. So consider that. If you are designing for kids, design spaces for them that they really enjoy being in, but then don't be afraid to have a space that's just yours. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. All right, guys, that is it for this week's episode. I know that designing, if you have kids, you're going to understand that this episode is necessary in a lot of ways. And if you don't, it might not seem like it's necessary. But the rules also, to a certain extent, apply to dogs and other pets, and maybe even other family members. So think about how people are going to use the space, how you want people to use the space, what you want the space to tell people about how they're supposed to interact with it. And be, in quote, selfish, because I don't really think you're being selfish. But if it's your home and you're designing your home for yourself and your needs, design your home for yourself and your needs. And if one of those needs is a private space, it's a little sanctuary for you, so be it. Have that private space. We will be back in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, keep your eyes peeled for that bathroom blog. It may be that it's not completed by then, but I'm doing everything in my power to make it happen so it can be done. I'm checking it off the list. So hopefully I'll have some details and some pictures for you on the blog soon. All right, that's it, guys. I will see you soon.